After Arsenal's horrible 1-0 loss to Newcastle in St James's Park, our second year in a row going there and losing 1-0, Arsenal fans are rightfully very upset. There's now been 3 games in the Premier League with 2 losses and only 1 point gained. And if you had watched that game against Newcastle, you would have just seen Arsenal with just all kinds of off. Arguably one of our worst performances I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years from this team. It was just atrocious. We created 0.00 XG in 2 halves against Newcastle with shots on target. Absolutely disgraceful, not good enough. The performance from the back to the front was not good enough. We were just getting outplayed so easily. They played through our press. They played our defensive line easily. Saliba looked all kinds of off. Offensively, we brought absolutely nothing. Even with Ethan Winieri, he really couldn't do much. Arsenal really struggled, and it was arguably one of the hardest watches I've seen from Arsenal for the last 2 to 3 years. That performance kind of reminded me of the COVID Arsenal. Like, that's how bad we were. But now here's the thing, is that everyone, all these Arsenal fans, most of them actually, are really, in my opinion, kind of overreacting to the performance and overreacting to our recent form. I've even seen some Arsenal fans saying Arteta has to be sacked. Like, are we really being that dramatic right now? Yes, it was a horrible performance. Yes, we should have won the game. We needed to win the game, especially now that Man City dropped points against Bournemouth and Liverpool beat Brighton. It was a perfect opportunity for us to go get 3 points. We now sit behind the likes of Nottingham Forest. This time last year, we had 7 wins, 3 draws, and 24 points on the table. 0 losses. But now you look at it to where we are this season, we have only 18 points. We have dropped a whole 6 points compared to last season this time. Now again, I know the seasons are different, so you can't really compare, and this season we've had a lot more injuries in the first 10 games compared to last season, but either way you slice and dice it, it's just nowhere near good enough. Our defense looks atrocious. Attacking wise, we're not looking nearly as good as we should be, and overall it's very fair to say that our level has dropped from this time last year. But here's the thing, I'm really not too worried, at least not yet. I know it sounds crazy to a lot of you guys are calling for Arteta out, but I'm not quite worried just yet, and I'm going to explain why. The first thing you have to look at is no Martin Odegaard. Now I know every team has injuries, everyone's now moaning. I mean, look at Man City, they're still second and they have no Rodri, but there is no Martin Odegaard, right? And if you looked at the game we just played against Newcastle, look at the second half passing stats, there is clear that there's no Martin Odegaard. There's no good passes into the box. We had so many touches in the final third, but we just couldn't do anything, and we are struggling because our only real form of attack now is out wide through Bukayo Saka, being that Martinelli is still kind of struggling with his form. Trossard is not near good enough at the 10 right now as he was a couple games ago, and we are really struggling because our only real threat is through Bukayo Saka. And yes, we had some good performances without Martin Odegaard. You look at the PSG performance, but having no Martin Odegaard, the leadership he brings on the pitch dynamic. I made a video last season saying that everything we did that was positive in the final third was always through Martin Odegaard, and while the recent games have shown that, in our last 3 Premier League games, there's been 2 losses, 1 draw, nowhere near good enough. And you look at the 2 losses, Newcastle away, yes, is always a tough tie, but if you want to win the league, that's kind of the game you have to win. And then you look at another loss away to Bournemouth, that's a game you just have to win. But no Martin Odegaard should not be our only excuse. No Martin Odegaard is a huge loss for us and has been a huge loss for us since the moment he left and we had to play Tottenham, we had to play City. You could just see we were missing that fluidity that we had with Martin Odegaard, and it is a huge reason why we aren't performing as well. But there are also other factors we also have to consider. Defensively, we've been nowhere near as good enough. Even though theoretically we should be a better defensive team than last season, being that we have the additions now of Yuri and Timber and Calafiori, because Timber's going to be fit this season and obviously Calafiori is a new sign-in, we should be theoretically better defensively, but we are so much worse. This time last season in the Premier League, we only conceded 8 goals, but now you're looking at it, and this season we've conceded 11. In the league, we haven't kept a clean sheet since the Spurs game, and we are just all kinds of messed up at the back, which is something that needs to be dealt with. Of course, it's really difficult to be defensively solid when you have so many injuries, but I don't really see that as a reason to not be defensively solid. When you have a midfield with guys like Declan Rice and Thomas Partey, plus you have the defensive line that we do have, I don't see a reason why you can be so defensively weak. I don't know what's happening, because offensively in set pieces we're really good, but defensively in set pieces we are really atrocious. Something just seems off defensively and offensively. And yes, Martin Odegaard is a huge reason why we are kind of not playing well, especially attacking wise, but defensively I just don't quite know what it is. So all of these bad things, you're thinking to yourself, why am I saying that overreacting is a bad thing, calling for Arteta out is a bad thing? Well, let's look at the context of everything. Well, if you look at the top 10, right, Arsenal have played every single team in the top 10, most of them being away, with only 2 of those games being at home. When you compare that to Man City, when you compare that to Liverpool, Arsenal have undoubtedly had the toughest run so far to start the season. Now again, I'm not saying that's why we should not panic, but it is something you have to consider when you consider the whole context. That's on top of all the injuries that we have been having. 6 out of the 9 games we've played against the top 10 have been away from home. When you look at the toughest games you play in a season, away against Aston Villa, away against Spurs, away against Man City. These are really tough games for Arsenal that you could possibly play, and while we've played every single one of them, and against those 3 we've come out undefeated. Now, I'm not trying to diminish how poor we really were against Newcastle. Absolutely atrocious. We should have beat Liverpool with how we were playing, especially in that first half, and we should have beaten Bournemouth. I don't care if we're down to 8 men against Bournemouth, we should have won. I'm not using any of this as an excuse at all. Arteta needs to look in the mirror. Everyone in the Arsenal club needs to look in the mirror, but at the same time, I do think us fans are really overreacting. Calling for Arteta out is absolutely crazy and reactionary, and I think what we have to do is keep our heads down, keep focusing. The season is far from over. Yes, it's not great how we're sitting right now, so far away from the top, but as we all know, anything can happen in the Premier League, and if we can string together some performances, Odegaard returns from injury, Calafiori returns from injury, the team starts gaining some momentum, some form again, especially with the international break coming up, we'll have a good time to reset. I don't think it's the end of the world right now. It's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. Everyone just needs to calm down.